Remember back in the day when console wars were like a real thing? There were literally couples getting divorced over which console they thought was better. Families were being torn apart. Friendships were ending because of it. But all that absolute nonsense is in the past because we've already established that Xbox is the best console ever, right? I kid, but honestly, it was kind of an intense time to be a gamer. And I know you guys are wondering, why is this dude just completely rambling on about video games? Well, it's not because we're going to be talking about or breaking down console wars or just video games in general, but today's collectibles are based on some of the best gaming franchises of all time. And I have to say, it's such a breath of fresh air to see a lot of these OMs jumping in and trying to give us collectibles based on video games. Jada Toys is a perfect example. They just, or they continue to give us, I should say, the Street Fighters line, and then they've already jumped in on the Mega Man universe, which is just absolutely phenomenal. We have also had McFarlane give us the Witcher universe in action figure form, and not just the live action one, but also those phenomenal figures that were actually based in the video game universe. And it doesn't stop there. I mean, he did give us the Doom universe as well. And I do believe that there are some other big franchises in the horizon. I know NECA just picked up or started to re-release a lot of their Assassin's Creed action figures. And in some cases, they do have sublines of already existing franchises that they're working on. For example, they did do a lot of the TMNT stuff, but based on a lot of their video game appearances. We just received that phenomenal Last of Us 2 pack, and the list goes on and on. I think they're doing an Assassin's Creed universe line as well. So the future is bright for action figure collectors that love stuff that is based in the video game universe. We are just getting started, but it's definitely exciting. And today we're going to be talking Spin Master. Yes, you heard that correctly. It's that weird line that used to make those tiny little 4-inch DC action figures that had like the gigantic hands and gigantic feet. And for some reason, they had gigantic batarangs that were like half the size of the actual figure. They were kind of just like little fun lines, I think mostly for children. I think a few collectors might have jumped in on them, but for the most part, they were meant for children or collectors of younger age that really didn't care about stupid articulation points or paint applications or sculpt work. They just wanted small little tiny DC action figures. And like I said, that's what I mostly know them from. And I think most of the collectible community, that's where we became familiar with Spin Master. But now they are trying their hand at 1/12 collectibles. And by the way, they're not the only company that we've seen do this recently. We saw Jada Toys do it, and I believe Haya Toys as well. So there are a number of different OMs that have tried their hand at different style of collectibles and then eventually move on to the 1/12 collectibles, which I think is where they're starting to see that there's a little bit more of a market, or they're just trying to expand their market as a whole. Regardless, this entire narrative has been very interesting, and I decided to cover some of the figures that they have offered thus far. All of these have listings on Amazon or different retailers, so you guys can go ahead and pre-order these. And I thought we should start off with the franchise that I'm definitely the most familiar with, and that is God of War. You can now pre-order a Kratos action figure, and I believe this isn't the first time that we've received Kratos in that type of scale. This may be like the third or fourth different OM to try their hand at Kratos. What's really interesting, I think the more popular one has to be the NECA version. A lot of people absolutely love it, and when they talk about Kratos, they usually reference that as like the standard. I actually saw this figure in person. I don't own it, and I watched a few videos here and there. For the most part, it seems like it's a great sculpt, phenomenal attention to detail, great accessories, but at the end of the day, it's usually what the problems that NECA runs into. It's just not really well articulated. And I will say this particular figure or this rendition definitely seems to run into some of those issues, at least in the promotional images. Now, it could also be that whoever took these images is just really bad at posing, but at least from the images that we have on the pre-order page, it appears he does have double jointed knees, but then no butterfly joints, and there's not a big cut in that shoulder area, so that could be a problem when it comes to posing him in certain situations. And then only single jointed elbows, which I think is one of the big major issues that I noticed through the promotional images. Not to mention that right shoulder pad, which seems like it's going to hinder articulation quite a bit, especially when he's raising the Leviathan axe. The head sculpt is a little bit suspect as well. Instead of them going an angry all-out head sculpt, they went with a very calm, serene look, which is definitely not what we think of when we're remembering Kratos. It's not like your prototypical vision of him, so it's kind of a little bit weird. Altogether, you will be getting 4 hands total, a gauntlet, the Guardian shield, as well as the Leviathan axe, and this will be retailing at $29.99. I will say the figure does look pretty decent. I think the price point is a little bit higher than I would have expected for that $29.99 price point. They could have easily thrown in an extra head sculpt at least. Not to mention I have some question marks regarding the overall scheme of the figure, the overall articulation, but regardless, it is available $29.99. And it's worth mentioning there is some paint in certain areas. I think like the lower half has like a wash on it, but aside from that, the belt area and the skin tone, I think, could have easily used a little bit of a wash or just a couple of extra paint applications here or there. It's not the end of the world. Like I said, I'm excited for people that are big God of War fans, but it is a tad bit disappointing just from looking at the images. Again, I don't have the figure in hand, but just looking at the images, it does seem like they could have done a little bit better. And this obviously couldn't be a complete set without Atreus being included, so you can't, obviously they're going to be purchased separately, but they will go up for pre-order at the same time, and I believe their arrival date is about the same, even though Atreus was actually revealed like a few weeks, I would say almost a couple of months after Kratos. But similar situation with the previous figure. Now what's really interesting here is you're still paying the $29.99 price point, but this obviously seems to be a much smaller figure. Again, same thing, you will be receiving 4 hands total, and then his bow and arrow, and all of the same issues that I had with Kratos I guess kind of apply to Atreus as well. Single jointed elbows, and then same thing, it doesn't appear to have any butterfly joints. And then the ab crunch, I didn't say anything about Kratos because I really couldn't tell, but I'm going to assume that there's a little bit of soft plastic in that mid torso area, and then maybe like a ball joint. Again, I'm just assuming because I don't have the figures in hand. But very disappointing, and similar to the Kratos, there's a lot of vibrant colors. They could have easily done like a little bit of a wash or just used a different color palette. I haven't played the game in a while, so I don't remember, but I just don't recall them being this vibrant. I would have loved like a more mute palette, I guess like a more matte finish on these figures, especially their skin tone. Not to mention, again, their head sculpts. I don't love them. They're just very calm, very serene. Very unlike what we see in the video game. So I'm not sure if this is the OM just really not understanding the characters or if it's a budgetary constraint. But again, they could have easily just done one head sculpt and then done a more iconic look for each one of them. You're clearly going to display them in action poses, and it makes no sense to have those head sculpts. But as I said, $29.99 for each one of these figures, and according to the Amazon website, they should be released, or they should start shipping on September 1st. Potentially they could be released a little bit earlier. We know those dates on Amazon are not very accurate, but the release date is for September 1st. The pre-order window is also open for the Jin Sakai Ghost of Tsushima action figure as well. And yes, essentially all of the issues that are present with the previous 2 figures are also going to be big major key issues. But I will say, if there is anything to take away from this particular figure or something that should stick in your mind, is definitely that I really like the body sculpt work on this. I mean, the articulation problems are still going to be there. The double jointed knees look extremely gappy and weird. They remind me a lot of like the Jazzwares Halo action figure knees that just looked ridiculous when they were articulated. But it's just a matter of functionality, right? I mean, it's an action figure. It's, $30. There's only so much that they can do once a figure starts to really get articulated and get into some dynamic poses. Sometimes some of the joints will look extremely weird at certain angles, But all that aside, there's some great texture here. You can definitely tell that they poured quite a bit more effort into the sculpt when it came down to this particular figure. I definitely feel like it's a step above the other two figures here, and it may just have to do with the fact that this figure doesn't come with any extra accessories aside from the katana and the sheath. That's it. That's all it's going to come with. No extra hands, no extra head sculpts. And I hate to definitely bring it up, but it's a little bit mind-boggling that they decided to put this particular price point for this figure, especially considering it's very, very lacking in certain areas. Like I said, the articulation points are going to be fairly similar to what we've seen, which definitely falls incredibly short for a $30 action figure. Just to give you guys some examples, I mean, we just had the Jada Toy Street Fighter action figures that got released, and those usually come with at least, like, I want to say like 3 pairs of hands, so 6 hands total, an extra head sculpt, an effect piece, an effect stand. So it definitely comes with way more than what we're receiving here. But if you guys are interested, it's a great figure. I don't know if we've ever gotten this particular character in action figure form. So if you guys are interested, again, the $29.99 price point, it's a little bit high. You're not getting a lot, but I don't see anybody else picking up this license. It could also be that Sony just is overcharging in fees for using some of their properties. I mean, that's the only thing that I can think of. Regardless, if you guys are interested, $29.99, and the pre-order date is essentially the same for all of the 3 figures that have been mentioned up to this point. Lastly, I wanted to talk about the Horizon Forbidden West action figures. We are supposed to be receiving 2. The first one being the deluxe Aloy action figure. Really interesting because there are a number of big time YouTubers that have already received this figure and have already reviewed it. So you guys can actually go out there and probably type it in your search bar and probably find at least a handful of these reviews on there. But at least from my personal perspective and from the promotional images, this definitely seems to be the best figure that they have to offer up to this point. But you can definitely tell that it comes with a heftier price point, so it's a matter of personal opinion whether you're willing to spend the extra dollars just to get a better action figure. Now, in terms of the scheme or the articulation, it seems like it's going to be fairly similar to the previous one: single jointed elbow, double jointed knees, no butterfly joints, things of that nature. But it definitely comes with a plethora of different accessories, specifically 5 swappable face plates, as well as having, at least from the description, it seems like there were 8 hands total. So I'm not sure if there were 6 alternate hands plus the one that the figure already came with. It will also include a spear, a quiver, a bow, and an arrow. By the way, if you ever want to be remotely creeped out, take the faceplate off of your action figure and just stare at the hole where the faceplate is supposed to go. Honestly, it feels like it's like peering into your soul. It's kind of creepy. And as I said, even though I think the price point is a little bit too high, at least for my personal taste, I can definitely see where they utilized a lot of that extra deluxe price point. You do get the extra face plates, which is not something that you usually get from smaller OMs like this. You do get the extra accessories as well as the beautiful box art. It's worth mentioning, it looks phenomenal if you want to display the figure unopened, or if you just want to display the box itself after you take the figure out. It's still really cool and it's perfectly designed for this particular gaming franchise. The entire body mold and sculpt work is very intricate and I thoroughly enjoyed it. There's always something to look at. It is a very well designed figure, and overall you can definitely tell that there's a theme here. I think they prioritized maybe aesthetics and sculpt work over articulation, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of OMs do that. You have like NECA, for example, just to name a few, Super 7. They usually prioritize other things like box art, extra accessories, better sculpt work, extra paint, things of that nature. And like I said, it's not the end of the world, but it's a little bit disappointing that they weren't able to balance these figures out. And then lastly, they will have a Varl action figure. I believe that's the correct pronunciation. This is probably the franchise that I'm the least familiar with, but it will also retail for that $29.99 price point. It drops back. There's only one deluxe figure in this entire wave. wave. And I definitely have to be brutally honest, this may be the most intriguing figure of the entire wave thus far, or the entire series thus far, because I think it's really intricate. There's a lot of great sculpt work. It's a very vibrant color palette, and even though I don't think that it worked a lot with the God of War action figures, I think it fits way more with these particular figures, just because I've seen some gameplay, I've played a little bit here and there, and so the colors just make more sense with these two particular figures. Having said all of that, I'm very interested to see what you guys have to say. This is just my personal take. It's not to bash the line thus far. I know they're barely getting started with 112 collectibles, or at least in the mainstream, and so I'm not going to be too harsh, but I am a little bit worried about this entire franchise, or this entire line from Spin Masters. I think they could do a little bit better. I think there's definitely some things that they need to tweak here and there, but for the most part, I'm just worried. I think these figures are very close. I think they're a little bit overpriced. The articulation could be a little bit better. There could be a little bit more paint added to some of these figures, and they're lacking in accessories from time to time, depending on what figure you're looking at. So it's a little bit worrisome, but I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, for showing support for the channel. If you guys like this type of random action figure nonsense, then definitely stay tuned, because we do upload pretty consistently. As always, thank you guys for tuning in. Enjoy the hobby. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.